Good evening, everyone. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the warm welcoming that I have received so far in the last 10 days in the Jericho Public Schools. I'm excited, it's a great place, and we'll talk more about that. This is the reorganization meeting of the Jericho Union Free School District. And as this reorganization meeting goes, we start with me as the superintendent introducing the meeting, and then we say, do I have a motion for a president of the Board of Education?
And I want to say, welcome Dr. Kravitz. Very excited to have you, and welcome to the board for a fresh school year. I would like to make a motion for Sam Perlman to be president this year.
Do we have a second? Seconded by Lydia. Are there any other motions on the table? Do we have a vote, please? All in favor, say aye, or raise your hand.
You can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. One motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Perlman, as the new president of the Board of Education in Jericho. The meeting is yours, sir.
Well, first I want to thank my fellow board members for the confidence they're showing in me. And at this time, I would like to accept nominations for board vice president. Then I will go ahead and nominate Mrs. Jennifer Bartnoff for board vice president. Do I have any seconds? But Mr. Jin, seconds. Are there any other nominations for board vice president? Thank you. All in favor? All opposed? Motion's carried. Congratulations, Mrs. Bartnoff, on being elected Jericho School Board Vice President for the 25-26 school year. Moving on to the agenda for the reorg meeting. Unless anyone has any objections, I'd like to go and try to move resolutions number 3 through 37. Do I have a motion to move 3 through 7? Mr. Citron, thank you very much. Do I have a second? Second, Mrs. Bartnoff, thank you. Discussion.
Pardon the point of order.
Go ahead, sir.
On resolution under new business, ST 2025-01, I believe that's the attachment.
That's in the regular meeting, sir.
Oh, in the reorg.
We're in the reorg meeting.
Okay, good. Point of order withdrawn, thank you.
Wait, I have a question in my notes, I just want to see.
Go ahead, sure. Does anyone have other questions? Otherwise, I can start with a couple of points. First one, on resolution number 12, which is the board meeting schedule for the upcoming school year. The August 7th regular board meeting is being moved to August 4th with a start time of 7:30 p.m. The August 7th meeting will be moved to August 4th at 7:30 p.m. with a location to be dictated by the status of construction. Unless we know the status of construction. But okay, it will be at Robert Seaman School based on that status of construction. The second thing, while we're, Mr. Citro, whenever you're ready, let me know, but if anyone looks at the schedule of board meetings, you'll see that we now have 2 board meetings a month. We are looking to get rid of what some find to be a misleading title of work session. All board meetings will be formal board meetings. As all the work sessions were open to the public, all the board meetings will be open to the public, but there was some misunderstanding about that. Everything will be a board meeting. We will put out the agendas beforehand so you know, as we always do, the exact topics that will be decided, hopefully well in advance, whether it be presentations or votes or anything like that. So for all months, except for the month of August, we will be having 2 board meetings a month. And the last part on that is, I'm sure over the next few months, the next 2 months, you will start to see listed several executive session meetings. Those will be, just so you know in advance, mostly I would expect tied to interviews that the board will be conducting for any variety of administrative positions that we're going to need to fill over the summer. So if you see a whole bunch of executive session meetings pop up, do not worry, we have everything under control. We are just doing some interviewing. That's it. Mrs. Citron, did you find your question yet, or not yet? Okay, I'll keep going when you have it. Mr. Manuel, number 24 is new to this year's reorg package, where it authorizes the Assistant Superintendent for Business to make budget transfers for June and July. Why is this authority needed this year and it wasn't in the past?
It was always in the past. The last time we did it was 2 years.
It wasn't last year, I just didn't say, oh, okay.
It wasn't on the agenda last year, it was 2 years ago, but it covered 2 years, similar to this.
Got it. My mistake, I apologize. Can you, Mr. Coe, Mr. Manuel, Dr. Kravitz, the difference, remind me, I know we discussed this last year, between the healthcare providers detailed in number 32 and the district physicians that are detailed in number 19. What the different roles are. I know we discussed this last year, and I apologize, I just didn't have the chance. Healthcare provider is like the big company, I think, and
Yeah,
then,
the healthcare providers, as you can see, some of them are psychologists, they're consultants.
okay,
The other one you said was the physical.
The district
Yeah, those are the
physicians.
physicals for athletics, and anyone who requires a need for physical who may not be able to get it on their own.
got it, because that was, okay, I understand, so that was the physicals, the immunizations if they needed, those types of things, got it.
And
Okay,
the district physician also helps us if we just have any general questions on policies, or they'll be our expert in that area in case we have any.
I'm sorry, that's the district physician, or that's the healthcare
Physician.
providers? So
District physician.
So again, that's Mount Sinai.
Correct.
Okay, got it. And then my last question, depositories. I saw we have there JP Morgan Chase, we have some money at Capital One and Flushing Bank. As those are not Category 1 institutions, we keep, I assume, minimal amounts of money, or certainly under FDIC limits there?
Yeah, actually, Flushing, I don't believe we have anything deposited at this point. Most of our investments, if you recall, it was in NILAF, which was a New York Liquid Asset Fund. NILAF in class, which is a similar tool. It's a investment tool for school districts and municipalities. They both merged. So now instead of NILAF, you'll only see NICLAS. And most of our reserves and our investments are in that because it's still paying upwards of 4%.
Yes, number 22. We need number 22, appointment of educational agency, that's.
Wait,
We need to change the educational agency data protection officer for the school year.
I think we should maybe change it to the Director of Technology.
It should be the title, not the person.
Is that okay with you, Steve?
Number 22.
I had a question regarding number 33, official school district newspapers. I know that we always do Newsday and Jericho News Journal and Syosset Jericho Tribune. Would we want to consider removing Newsday? Their viewership has extremely declined and very one-sided, views.
No, for a couple of reasons. We, our bids, when we advertise for bids, Newsday is probably better because it does have a much wider circulation for contractors or whoever's going to bid on whatever we're going out to bid. So we have to put legal notices in a newspaper that has larger circulation. As far as the budget, we've always traditionally done Newsday and the two local ones. And I'm not sure if it's a regulation, but we also do in the Spanish one, yes, you're correct. I don't know who said that.
I said that.
Yes, thank you,
Do we
Michelle.
need to which Spanish?
I feel Newsday is,
Oh, okay.
because it's a large
Yeah.
circulation, we kind of have to do.
Yeah, I mean, some districts do, some districts don't.
Well, okay.
Have Newsday and some, so, with
So which-
Mr. Manuel's point for the bids, like, it's split up,
Yeah.
Do they use a different, why newspaper that we don't know about?
They use local districts, just depends. But with
So
regards to
it's-
the bids,
yeah, it's the
Mr. Mitchell
bids.
saying is, you wanna have more people be able to see it, so you
Yes.
get more than.
100%, yeah.
And then we put any budget information go into all three. Actually, no.
Yeah.
They do go into all three.
Four,
Newsday
afterwards,
at 4, yeah.
So Newsday I know is a paid, so Newsday is a paid service, so not everyone has, most people don't have access to it unless you're paying for a subscription. And most people don't pick up paper newspapers anymore, everything's digital, and unless you have a paid subscription, you can't view anything. So I don't know if it's really worth it to do Newsday anymore.
You just said you use it for.
I know, but other school districts don't,
So,
and they use internet.
Again, for the bids, I need Newsday.
For the
That's-
bids, you need Newsday, so
The
how do
bids I
other
need
school
Newsday.
districts
For
do
the,
it?
for the budget information,
Yes.
if we want to eliminate Newsday, I believe we can.
But how do other, I'm just trying to understand, how do other districts do their
I think
bids?
yeah, you need to. I think what Steve was saying, it's a mix. A lot of districts, I think, do use Newsday official in addition to their local paper.
Okay,
And there are some districts, I think you use Smithtown as an example, that only uses the local for the budget. Again, I think for the bids,
okay.
most districts are using Newsday because it's a wider circulation.
If we don't use them for the budget, what do we need to give them a notice? How does that
No,
work?
you
Just
don't
don't,
do-
just don't do it, got it. Okay, thank you.
But are you gonna give me direction?
Yes, that's what I thought you were doing.
I think what we'd like to do is for bids,
Yeah,
you could, for bids, can we do what Mrs. Varno was, I guess, do for bids, use Newsday,
Yeah.
for budget and other voting things, use the local newspapers.
Sounds good.
Is that correct, Mrs. Which one?
Yeah.
What's the negative of keeping them in Newsday?
Well, there's definitely costs associated with putting in Newsday. And if our community, again, the budget is very local, so I don't need the large circulation of all of Long Island like I do for bids. So if we want to just use the local ones, we can. And we would have to also, because it's still a law, use the Spanish
Yeah.
one as well.
So how come the Spanish one is never in our resolution thing here?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that as I was speaking.
Well, I don't know
But we
what
could
the name
actually have it
official.
translated and put into local without going into.
Yes.
But it also, I don't know, like legally, what is the name of the official newspaper? We could
Say-
throw lots of paper ads going to any
Any paper,
So
yeah.
this is, so what does official newspaper mean legally?
Yeah, that's
And it's just where you're, that you're going to.
Just so everyone knows that these are the.
Yeah,
Yeah, this next way at a reorganization meeting, you list where your methods of communication, what they're gonna be.
Right, so it says for bids.
So this language is gonna change for Newsday for bids,
That's fine.
local newspapers for elections, and the name of the paper that Ms. Stokel knows also for elections. Wait, we don't need that for bids, correct?
Correct.
Alrighty. Anyone have any other comments, Mr. Jin, Dr. Balachander? The last thing I would say about this, President, look, we appreciate, as you can see here from these contracts, all of our service providers and the work they do, but as we've talked about for the last few years, as a point of best practice, I think sometime during this year, the board will be addressing all of our service providers and looking to see if it's appropriate to put out RFPs for anybody, except for, of course, Cullen and Danowski, who's on a normal 5-year cycle, and we're in year 2 or 3 of that. So, but that's all good. Do I have all in favor of the resolutions?
As amended.
5-0, as amended, sorry, 5-0, great. As all business on the agenda for tonight's reorg meeting is complete, do I have a motion to adjourn the reorg meeting? Dr. Kravitz is all about process. Do I have, that's fine, that's a great idea. Do I have a motion to adjourn the reorg meeting and open the regular meeting for July? Motion, thank you, Mrs. Citron. Do I have a second? Mrs. Vartnoff, all in favor? Aye, thank you very much.
Does anyone want to do pledge? I don't think so. If someone wanted to.
We're great Americans here. If someone wants to do it, we do it.
Yeah, do you want to sing?
You don't want me to. Mrs. Breitenbach is here. She might want to sing for us. She did not bring any of her lovely students. As we do this on a nice sunny Thursday evening in the summer, I want to welcome all of you to our 25-26 inaugural regular school board meeting. It is great to see any crowd, especially this large crowd that we have. It is my pleasure to welcome two new faces, Mr. Kenny Jin, our newest board member, and Dr. Robert Kravitz, our new superintendent. Moving along, we'd like to begin with the approval of the minutes from our June 12th meeting. Can I have a motion, please? Mrs. Martin, I have a second. Second, Dr. Balachandra. All in favor of approving the minutes as in there? Wait, Mrs. Citron, no? Mrs. Citron, 5-0. Thank you very much. I know it's not on there, but Superintendent, would you like to deliver a superintendent's report of anything you have to report after a full 10 days in the position?
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Perlman. Good evening, everyone. And again, this is my first meeting in Jericho. And that was 10 days, and they've been incredibly welcoming. Everyone I have met, staff is just fantastic, and I appreciate all the help that I have received during the transition. Jericho has a well-earned reputation for excellence, and I am proud to be part of this great tradition with the goal of helping it go even further. I'd like to share a lighthearted moment from today. I conducted my first interview with Mr. Cohn with a teaching candidate, and I asked the teaching candidate, "Why are you interested in working in Jericho?" The candidate smiled and said, "Jericho is Jericho. And by the way, you just interviewed here too, so I guess the same reason applies." And that moment reminded me of the pride this community holds. As I continue learning more about the district's inner workings, I look forward to developing an action plan that outlines my goals, and I will ensure regular updates to maintain full transparency along the way. Now, to address some concerns I've already heard from the community, Mr. Manuel, would you like to speak about the busing issue?
Yes. As we know, in June, we had a little bit of a heat wave, a lot of a heat wave, for a few days. And the concern was that 18 of our large buses through First Student do not currently have air conditioning. I'd like to give, a little history on just the district as a whole with respect to air conditioning. Our first priority, obviously, were the buildings and the facilities to make sure our learning environment during the school day had air conditioning. We were one of, if not the first, on the island to fully air condition our facilities, and not just by putting a square in the window or a wall unit. We did it centrally while replacing all of our univents district-wide. So every classroom, every instructional space, every non-instructional space at this point is fully air conditioned in the district. As far as transportation and our buses, in the last 10 years, we've grown our fleet, district-owned vehicles with our own drivers. When I started here, we had 2. We currently have over 20 buses and close to 20 drivers. All of our buses are fully air conditioned. Most of our buses are the 44 passenger. They're not the big, large buses because our facilities do not have the capacity to repair the large buses. The only 2 large buses we have are the ones that are the coach-style buses. And again, all of our 22 buses are fully air conditioned. The concern came with First Student buses. There are 18 large buses that do not have air conditioning. All of the others do with First Student, and we have probably a total of close to 50 buses that we contract through First Student. So the directive came to at least research and talk with First Student and see what kind of options were available. We did have a meeting with them over the past week. What I can report back, of the 18, there will be 2 new air-conditioned buses for this September, which is great. That brings the number down to 16. I don't know how many people are aware, but there is a new law in place that beginning in 2027, all school buses, new school buses that are purchased must be zero emission or electric. First Student and Jericho partnered and to get a grant in order to cover the difference, because electric buses are much more expensive than a regular school bus, to cover the delta between the cost of an electric bus versus the cost of a regular bus. And the grant was awarded. I can report by second quarter of '26, which is springtime, that we will be receiving, the first student will be receiving for sole use in the Jericho School District, 10 electric buses with air conditioning. So that'll be in the spring of '26. And that brings the number down to 6. I talked about the 2, these 10 out of the 18, and there's 6 left. And I discussed with the board the cost associated with retrofitting those 6 buses, which is approximately $15,000 to $16,000 per bus to retrofit them for air conditioning. No matter what, they would not be retrofitted by September. It's just time-wise that it would not happen. So the board will look at the numbers and discuss it in the coming months and go from there.
Thank you very much. Excellent job. Thank you. It's a pleasure working with you and me having met with first student with you. Very knowledgeable, and I'm very proud to be here with you. Next, on the other side. Oh, you have a question regarding busing?
I was just gonna say thank you for doing all of this work really quickly. I know there was a
You're very
concern, and I appreciate you addressing the community's concern quickly. Thank you.
I know Mr. Cohn is going to speak about the
Science?
Science.
Good evening, everyone. So I know at the last board meeting, some questions and concerns were raised regarding the new versions of the earth science and biology regents that were offered by the district this past June. So I wanted to give some updates regarding some data. I want to be able to talk a little bit about some steps that we've been attempting with the state, provide some clarity on past practices in regards to new curriculum and new exams, and the philosophy that the district has had, and certainly provide a recommendation from the district as to how to proceed forward, specifically around 2 more new science regents and curricula that will be offered next year. So in regards to data, I met with both Ivy Sherman and Kim Libertini. Ivy was unable to be here tonight, so she apologized and she asked me to present in her absence. So from a bare minimum passing percentage, and I specifically stated that way, we actually saw some strong correlation similarities to what Jericho data has typically been over the last 3 years. So prior to this exam, our passing percentage on the earth science regents was approximately 83 to 89% given any given year over the previous 3 years. This year, it was 84%. For the biology regents, previously called living environment, our passing percentage was typically at 98 to 99% in the previous 3 years, and this current year, it was at 98.5%. Where we definitely saw a decline in our students' performance is when you talk about mastery percentages. So mastery is a score of 85 or above on the exam on a 100-point scale. So for the earth science regents, the previous 3 years, we typically saw our students scoring at mastery between 69 and 74% rate. This year was at 41%. And in biology, we typically had seen for the previous 3 years, 81 to 92% of our students performing at mastery. This year it was 56%. The data analysis that Ms. Libertini was able to do included comparison to local districts that we were able to gain access to their data as well. What we saw was that from a passing percentage standpoint, we were either at the top or towards the top of those passing rates in comparison, and significantly higher than every other Nassau County district that we had data on for the mastery level. Again, our mastery levels were down, so I'm not trying to tout that as some major success, but in a comparative, we saw that Jericho did better, our Jericho students did better on these 2 exams than our neighboring Nassau districts that we had access to. In addition, Ms. Libertini's extensive analysis included data comparisons both historically and to other schools. So historically to our own scores, as I mentioned, in previous years, and to other schools. Ms. Libertini also did a tremendous deep dive into analyzing the curriculum as it was laid out by the state and how it then led to the percentages of each of the areas that were supposed to be tested on the Regents exams. She also did a comparison of Lexile levels, reading levels, and what would be considered appropriate past practice as well as new practice. Her analysis led to looking at question analysis, so interpreting the quality and the number of questions. For instance, in her analysis, she found that many questions were vague, included a lot of jargon and misleading information, often graphs and charts that had a lot of external information that wasn't relevant and pertinent for the actual question itself. And therefore making those questions harder than what we believe they needed to be. Also, in both cases, both earth science and biology felt that there were more questions than needed to be provided on the exam, especially given the time constraints for all students, but specifically our students. Ms. Libertini has been in communication with both local and state science administrators to do analysis and to express clear concerns with the state, as well as Jericho sending clear direction to the state regarding specificity of where we found issues with the exam. Based on Ms. Libertini's analysis, most of the issue really was around the areas that I just highlighted, the jargon, the extra information, and making the questions confusing for our students, for all students, as we saw neighboring districts and their scores as well. We have found that it's been difficult to communicate with the state on this issue. We've not received any clear acceptance of flaws and issues, and therefore it's been a bit of a lack of support and guidance around the potential needs for corrective measure moving forward for the exams, and certainly in looking ahead to next year's chemistry and physics exams. We also felt that it was important to give a little bit of history around why Jericho chose to be at the forefront of the new exams. Historically, Jericho has always been at the forefront of new curriculum and new exams. We philosophically feel it's really important to make sure that we're providing our students with the most modern levels of curriculum and instruction. In addition to wanting to make sure that we're providing them with that on state curriculum and state assessments, it plays itself out in broader ways. Obviously at Jericho High School, we have an extensive advanced placement program. AP exams are often aligned with these new standards even before Regents exams become aligned with these standards. So to make sure that our students are being exposed to new content, to new curriculum, to new methodologies, to new ways of expressing their thinking and their understanding is something that we have historically always valued and typically perform very well on. For instance, the algebra and the geometry exams that were offered in the last 2 years were also equally new versions of these exams. Certainly, we haven't heard the concerns that we've heard on science, but from a philosophical standpoint, Jericho moved forward with providing those versions of those exams in kind. We certainly heard from the public, and we certainly saw in our own data the concerns with the exam, the concerns with our students' performance levels. I know an email went out to the community in terms of some options that families had in terms of how scores would be able to be listed on transcripts. And then finally, in terms of recommendations for moving forward, because I know that there's a really strong question out there as to what should happen with chemistry and physics for next year. In keeping in line with everything that I just said about what the philosophies of the district have been, we do feel that even with the difficulties that we've experienced with these two exams, that it's in our students' best interest to be at the forefront of the new chemistry and the new physics curriculum, and hence the Regents exams. And to sort of put context on that, there was only one group of constituents that were really excited about this year's Earth Science and Biology Regents, and that were our advanced placement teachers of the subsequent courses. So our AP Environmental Studies teachers and our AP Bio teachers felt that there was a much stronger alignment between the way questions and content was being presented in those exams, and hence that our students would be better prepared in the future, hence next year when they sit for those courses and those AP exams. Similarly in kind, if we made a choice to go back and stay with the older version of the chemistry and physics regents, we wouldn't necessarily be best preparing our students when the year after they take Regents chemistry, they might be in advanced placement chemistry class and not being as prepared as some others may have been, if not exposed to the new curriculum and the new forms of assessment.
I have a question. So if we go with the AP next year with the new regions, can we, if we wait out a year, can we see the data of other schools and what they've done, what they would do, and what is the questions? So we can be better prepared?
The data that we can see can only be either what schools themselves are willing to share with us. I think it's often easier to share data with schools when you have data of your own to be able to make it a comparison, even for good or for bad. So we may not get school-based data as quickly. Eventually, when the state releases it, certainly it would be available to us, so we might be able to do that. I guess part of the question is whether that's truly going to provide advantage for our students or disadvantage. I've outlined where we feel that there might be disadvantage for our students. The other question is what might a second year iteration of an exam look like if there were flaws in year one. So our students may not necessarily benefit from being able to see what that exam was if the state goes ahead and makes other changes to it.
But aren't they gonna eliminate region by 29 or something like that?
There certainly has been talk about eliminating or creating alternative means for high school diplomas. They're not talking about eliminating them in its entirety. And based on history here in Jericho, I don't think it would be a stretch for us to anticipate that our students might still opt to sit for Regents exams as a baseline for a diploma, and certainly could benefit from that. So, yeah.
Okay, Jen, you can wait. So in the event that we do not get feedback, the feedback we've been seeking from the state, and we don't know whether this exam is going to be changed, are we still going to offer to our students that the grade can be pass-fail ahead of time?
You're talking about
For next year.
for next year?
Correct.
You know, I know that based on the outcomes is the reason why that there was a decision to offer pass-fail for the earth science and the bio. We certainly haven't used that to anticipate that similar issues would exist. I would be concerned about using a broad brush to simply say that moving forward, we're going to make pass-fail an option for any and all regents or any and all new regents. Again, no one came forward and felt like there was a need to do that with the algebra and the geometry regents that we offered. So I don't know that there's enough history to say that any and all new science regents automatically will present the same issues.
I guess the difference between the math exams and these are just that the science exams were largely comprehension-based, or reading comprehension-based, and at a 12th grade reading level. So I think that I don't know that we can compare the two, but so that might be why people aren't as vocal about the math as they are in science.
I think each of those exams had their own issues, and certainly Lexile levels were a big part. I mean, I see Dr. Sundberg in the room, and I know that we're going to be anticipating new social studies exams, and we've experienced that, and certainly, so again, how we start to look at the purity of Lexile levels, I worry about just saying that it's only going to be for all science exams. I think that there's a broader conversation. So I'm not trying to be argumentative to say that, no, we shouldn't do it, but I think that it's a comprehensive conversation if we are considering doing that.
Hi. So, obviously, a number of concerns and questions. Do we have the data yet of how many parents chose the pass, how many students chose the pass-fail option? Have you seen, a large number, so to speak?
It wasn't, relatively speaking, it was not a majority of the families that were already opting into that. But again, I wasn't.
I had said it wasn't an overwhelming majority, it wasn't a majority of families that were opting into that, but honestly, I wasn't directly involved in seeing that data, so I don't want to give any misrepresentation to the board on that.
You're gonna be passing the mic back and forth. So the fact that New York State has not given us the support that we have asked for, and maybe I wanna say pre-exam and post-exam. Pre-exam, I think the lack of support was probably having not enough information to prepare the students. Though we knew the curriculum, but we didn't know enough about the test itself. Is this accurate?
They gave a series, I think it was 2 modules of sample questions. That's not necessarily uncommon when they're coming out with new iterations of exams. So again, based on the experiences that we heard from our students and the scores that we saw, clearly there was a flaw. For me to say that it was merely because they didn't give out enough sample data, I'm not sure that that's
just maybe one piece of the puzzle. It's not the only piece of the puzzle. I'm just trying to put as many pieces of the puzzle together as possible to make, first of all, to inform the community. I think there's a lot of people out there that have the same concerns and have questions, and also just we as a board, we approve curriculum. How do we go forward? What's best for the students? What's best for their future? What's best for their mental health? Because walking out of the tests, last month, I know a lot of them were distraught because they felt, they weren't well prepared. Not because the school failed in any way, because the school did everything possible based upon the information they were given by New York State, but New York State gave a lack of information. Am I correct?
I'm hesitant to be able to come to the exact same verbiage. There's clearly an issue with these exams. And obviously we find flaw in the version of the test that the state created. How that translates then backwards to curriculum and instruction and preparation, I think we stand by the fact that we felt like our students were very well prepared. Some of the data shows that their performance levels meet that standard, but obviously when we understand the mastery levels and other forms of data, we can see the flaws in it. So again, it's important semantics, so I'm not trying to be difficult around semantics. We know that there were issues, but I'm not so sure that I can then, and we stand behind saying it's a preparation issue.
So they gave us sample, you said sample questions. Did we know how, I think just, actually, I don't know the exact answer. How many were written questions and how many were multiple choice?
There are module-based questions. Overall, the old, the state reduced the earth science exam from 85 total questions to 50. And again, we felt that that number should have come down more towards 40. As far as a breakdown right now between long answer and short answer, I don't have that in front of me.
But, I'm sorry, so usually, let's say in past years, how was the test broken out? Was there multiple choice on some, long answer on some, short answer on some?
Again, I'm not,
Okay.
I don't want to.
That's fine, that's,
I don't wanna give
I know,
misinformation on it.
Dr. Sherman's not here, and I know that, she probably has a lot more of that information, but what I'm just trying to get at is, from my understanding is that the test was mainly composed of, I wanna say long answer versus multiple choice, which is almost a little bit easier, or, you have the choices in front of you, the kids can make the choice, and even if they're rushing at the end, there's a time constraint, at least they can bubble something in and they won't miss the question.
So I think the best way I can answer that, Jen, is to say that the new standards, and this is something that Ms. Lambertini had provided to me, the new standards that are adopted by the state education department aim to have students apply their knowledge in new situations, analyze data that they have not seen before, and take in new information on the spot and integrate the new information with knowledge that they already have in order to problem solve and draw conclusions. So that's incredibly higher order thinking. So that's the goal of these exams. And certainly I think that there was preparation in our classrooms to get students prepared for that. But when you then also factor in the Lexile levels, the number of questions, the way that there was information put into these questions and diagrams that was could be misleading and provide other challenges for students. They made questions that we believe went beyond meeting these goals. So certainly it's a change in format for the exam in order to meet these goals.
Okay, so can we just break down each subject? Earth science, right? That was taken just now. Next year, are we going to be doing the same exact test again, or do we have the option to go back?
There's no option. It was a one-year option.
That was a one-year option.
So
Okay.
there is only going forward with these versions of the curriculum and the exams
For Earth science.
for earth science and for bio.
Okay, Earth science and bio. This is it. We're going forward with this. Okay, everybody, I understand. Chemistry and physics.
Mhm.
Now there is an option, correct? Because now next year, there's an option.
There's a one-year option as to whether districts want to move forward with the NGSS aligned standards of the exam or to remain for one more year in the old standards and the old formats of the exam.
And if I can just add, I think Ms. Sherman would probably be the best person knowing that.
Absolutely. I know that whatever we can get answered and whatever comfort we can give to the community tonight, I'm not expecting all the answers, but I do know that we as a board, as a school, as administration, we need to make a decision soon regarding chemistry and physics because the school year is approaching shortly, so how do we handle this right now? What's the pros, what's the cons? We're in a very tough situation considering we have no support from New York State.
I mean, at this point, I think I've presented to the board
Yes.
what the district's
So, I guess-
recommendation is.
I think at the next meeting, when we have
Next
Ms. Sherman
meeting?
here, we can have a more healthy conversation and we'll prepare for it and get some data. And
But the
whatever's
August
available.
4th meeting, right?
Yeah.
So I guess.
Yeah.
Do you guys think it's worth it to have a public survey?
Public survey,
About
About
opting
whether
in,
we-
opting out.
No, yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Like opt-ins for the next year's of physics and chemical, whether we want to go with the new version or stay with the old version.
I think before we even do that, we need to have that conversation of what everything entails and getting our data. So, at the next meeting in August, having Ms. Sherman here and being able to answer those questions and present that idea, I think would be the best thing. because we are not, obviously the person who has a specialty in that area would be the best person to comment.
Just one last thing, and then I'll give the mic over to whoever wants to speak. When is the deadline to report the pass or fail for the students? What?
I don't know that off the top of my head, I know that it was.
It's September 1st.
September 1st?
I think so on the email.
I didn't see the deadline. Was it in the email?
I think so.
Okay.
Sorry.
You have to choose. Already when?
I thought it was July
I
3rd.
think it was, oh, maybe it was. No, I think that was.
I think there was a July 3rd deadline
That was the
for
retake.
signing up for the retake.
Yes,
I
July
think
3rd,
September
yeah,
1st.
he's right. Yes, it was for the retake. Okay, so we think maybe the deadline has not come yet for the pass or fail option. I guess.
We can send out an email blast
Yeah,
to get some
yeah,
information.
let's look into that and just send a reminder, hey, the deadline is X. Okay, so I guess, if anyone else has any questions?
I know there are people who have comments. Right after we're done with the superintendent's report, we're going to look for the opportunity to public be heard, and I'm sure we'll continue part of this conversation. So please be patient with us for 2 more minutes. Mr. Cohen, you're being very presumptuous, but okay. The one question I just want to confirm that I've been told is that New York State has not published pass rates, mastery rates for the state as a whole, and they've told us it's going to be, or they've told others, because they haven't told us, that it's going to be many months before that information is going to be available. That is what I've been told.
I heard that as well.
Okay, so, but if you heard it from a credible, I heard it from another board
I
member.
believe we heard it from the state,
Okay.
that, they're gonna follow similar timelines of when they normally come out with that type of data. And based on similar timelines, yes, it would take months.
Okay. Dr. Kravitz, back to you.
So that actually concludes my very long superintendent's report. Thank you, Mr. Khan. Thank you, Mr. Manuel. Thank you to the board. Thank you again for everyone for the warm welcome. I look forward to working together to serve the students and families of Jericho.
Great, now we're going to move ahead to the opportunity for the public to be heard. If you would like to make a comment or ask a question, please approach the microphone, tell us your name, and if you are representing a specific group, your affiliation. If you would like your statement to be included in our board minutes, you must hand a written copy of your remarks to our district clerk, Victor Emanuel, before leaving tonight.
Good evening. My name is Scott Rothstein. I'm a parent of a student at George A. Jackson Elementary School. I just want to have a comment and then a question about the air-conditioned buses. First off, thank you so much, Mr. Manuel, for doing so much work on that. Really appreciate that. My math might be not right. 12 buses are now going to have air conditioning where it was 18 before, so that's terrific news. On the 6 buses that will need to be retrofitted, I just wanted to express support to the board for getting that done as soon as possible, preferably really before the next summer, especially if there's definitely another chance of more heat waves. I did want to ask when we can expect a decision on those 6 buses.
I believe, based on our conversations, the retrofit time is sort of 5 to 6 months.
Yeah, obviously impossible for September, so the board does have some time to absorb what they learned over the last few days about the costs associated with it. The first student did say that obviously there's a lead time with purchasing the equipment, and then a lead time in individually replacing those. I would imagine if the board made a decision by the end of the calendar year, we'd be okay for next summer.
Thank you. And I also just want to ask, if AC doesn't get installed on the buses, will there be some sort of plan in place to either notify parents or protect kids, if another heat wave comes? Because, it was a few weeks ago, we weren't even notified.
Yeah, I know. It was, they were expecting, certainly it even got hotter than what they were expecting. It was not a good few days for many students on Long Island. But we're looking at the retrofitting, we're looking at if there's any lower cost options that may not be air conditioned to provide relief. And obviously, we will communicate if we know a heat wave is coming, going forward, and which buses may or may not have air conditioning.
Thank you so much, appreciate it.
Hi, my name is Lee. My son is in high school. We took biology test. My one suggestion is if we move forward for next year for the physics and chemistry, can we give the kids more time? I think most people on the kids, they don't have enough time to finish it. After, my son said after 2.5 hours, he just figure it whenever he can. So if we can give them like 1 extra hours, since it's a test review, so may help them.
I think that feedback is really important, and it goes along with our analysis that there were too many questions on the exam. Unfortunately, though, we don't get to dictate how long students have to take state exams. That's clearly directed by the state. We wouldn't have the ability to provide them with more time. But again, it's important feedback. I think we feel the same way, so I appreciate that.
So the time it was set by the state, not by us. Thank you.
I am Joe Lin. My son's in 10th grade right now, going to 10th. So, speaking about the regions, I'm going to speak about biology since that's the one my son took. So the first comment I want to make is that anything I say now is not a reflection on the teachers. My son actually loved his biology class. He loved his teacher. So this is actually more a commentary of the situation itself. Right? So, and the second part is, I actually believe that the new standards are great. That these next-gen standards are more reflective of the situations the kids will face in the real world. Right? So, it's not a commentary on whether this is the right direction or not. So, with that being said, some points I want to make. One is, I really felt after reviewing with my son the process leading up to the regions, that there was insufficient resources in terms of preparation. So the example I want to give is on the biology exam. They weren't given any samples that reflected the exam they would actually see. And that's very important. What they were given was a 200-page booklet that was the living, the previous standards, right? So what they were practicing over and over in class was what they would see if we had been doing the old standard. Then they walk into an exam with a completely different format, right? That is problematic. And the fact that the teachers don't have the resources to support these kids, that's a problem. The fact that these kids aren't given the resources to succeed, that's a problem. So I think that's the first thing that has to be addressed. If you're going to give them material, it should reflect what they're going to see, not what they would have seen if it had been a different standard. I also want to make the comment that in terms of our student body, this is a very ambitious group of kids. They set very high goals. And I coach advanced robotics. And when they set a goal to go to a world championship this past season and they failed, you don't want to see their face when they fail. It is just, they are broken down because they really believe in setting goals, because these things are a measure of what they've learned, and they believe firmly that if they do well, it means that they've succeeded and they've achieved what they're trying to do. So whether it's competition or regents, that by having them not reach their goal, it really has a mental and emotional impact on these kids. It took me 3 months after they failed to get to Worlds to get them back on track, right? And now you're talking about an entire grade that is impacted by it. And then how many kids will be impacted, not just immediately, but long-term, because they can't get over the fact that they failed. And I know from a pass fail or from, what the regent says is, it's not the standard our kids measure by. It just isn't. For them, if they're not getting mastery, that's a failure. So, the other thing is this new approach, it's a big paradigm shift for these kids. This isn't just, oh, let's word things differently, let's slightly think about things differently. My wife is in education. This is phenomena and cluster-based questions. They're asked to read and comprehend things, then problem solve using information that they've learned. That is dramatically different from the memorization and regurgitation approach that they have been previously taught and is being taught in every other class. So for us not to give them the resources to achieve success, that's a major failure of the system itself. I took computer science, computer engineering in college, and that's a mix of electrical engineering and computer science. And one of the reasons I did it was computer science was too easy for me. Electrical engineering was harder, but the combination was actually even harder. When we looked at the average GPA for computer engineering, it was actually lower than both electrical engineering and computer science. Why? Because the thought process for those two things are dramatically different. And for a person to navigate that requires a tremendous amount of discipline and requires a tremendous amount of mental agility. And for us to put them in that situation where they're preparing for something completely different, expect them to make that mental jump. During the time constraints of a timed exam, it's just unrealistic. I understand that the school district made the best decision they could a year ago in terms of biology, based on what they knew and what they had hoped and based on the historical practice. But we already know what the results are based on what happened this past year. Why should we repeat the same mistake if we don't have the proper resources in place for the next set of exams? That's us just banging our head against the wall and hoping for a different result. Right? Like, we already know that this is a major leap. And I know you mentioned geometry was also new. This next gen science standard is a paradigm shift. This is not similar to other changes that have come through. And even this is not new standard. I think it's been around for a few years. There are states that have adopted it earlier, but it's still new to a lot of states. Right? I heard you mention earlier comparing it to other schools. What I'm more interested in is not other schools that took the same exam and how we compare, because I know we have smart kids. So of course we're gonna do well compared to other schools that took the same exam. What I'm more interested in is how do we compare to the schools that didn't take the new exam? Did they have consistent data relative to their history while we didn't? Right? That's more interesting. To say, hey, we did better than other schools that had the same exam, that's not a surprise for me, at least. So what I'm urging the school district to do is to have a more conservative approach when it comes to this decision and not base it on, hey, we need to be at the forefront, right? In technology, I know, Kenny, you're from technology, right? We have a phrase, be on the cutting edge, don't be on the bleeding edge, right? And the reason for that phrase is sometimes you get so far ahead, you're taking such a big risk then you're actually hurting yourself. Right? And I feel like with bio, that's what we did. We went on the bleeding edge. We went a little bit too far. I think it's great to be on the cutting edge, but let's just not go to the point where we're cutting ourselves. The other thing is, I understand that we took this risk, but it's a high price to pay for these students. They get one shot at these regents after they take the class.
They get as many as they want.
They get as many, but realistically, let's be honest, you can retake it once, I get that, but expecting them to retake it 2 years down the road to try to make up for it is unrealistic. They're not gonna be restudying this 2 years down the road to retake this. And this is now something that is on their transcript. Right? So for us to take that risk, and for them to be the one that has to live with what's sitting on their transcript, I think it's a high price for them to pay. For a decision that they didn't make, a situation they have no control over. I think the students would be able to live with it better if they had a choice in the matter, but they didn't. So again, just urging, the other thing I'd just like to know, right now on the course catalog and what the students use to sign up for physics and chemistry, it states the old standard class. It's the physical settings, it's the chemistry settings. It's not the physical science and it's not the chemistry science. So if that's already what we've communicated out to the students and to the parents in the community, take a conservative approach. Maybe just stick with what we already communicated instead of saying, oh, well, we're going to go with a new standard just because we want to be on the forefront.
Thank you for your comment. We will look
Sorry,
into it.
just so I think, are you recommending we don't go just towards a new test for?
Unless, I'm saying that stay with the existing standards unless we are certain that we have the resources for the teachers and the students for them to succeed.
Can I just ask you a couple questions? Because, and for public, so Mr. Lin and I have talked about this previously. So when you talk about the other states having adopted these, are those exams available for our students to learn from? Do you have any idea if those tests were structured like the New York State test where we did that and we should have gotten our hands on those tests and used those to prep our students?
My wife would know better because she's in education, but I believe she said that she was looking at if there was options out there for sort of through Pearson and for others in terms of material that is available. There are a little bit of material, she said, that you can find, but it's just, these standards are just so new that it's just not a ton of material out there.
Understood.
And in some ways, I think the state is leaving the school districts themselves to come up with the material.
No, 100%. And then, for Mr. Cohen, do we know if the state has committed to providing any additional information for earth science and biology for this coming year, given that now it's going to be mandatory? Have they said anything about providing more of the material that Mr. Lin is talking about? Okay, so, and then for Mr. Lin, from my understanding, from our conversation, from my other conversations, the issue was the format, like what they're asking students to do. Is it, and again, you know more about this, your wife knows more about this than I do, so I'm asking you because I don't know the answer to this question. The new format that we saw for earth science and biology this year, will that not be the new format for chemistry and physics next year? Where now, between our teachers and our experts and our students' tutors, we are going to now better understand the format for those questions so that we shouldn't expect this type of, and again, this type of problem in the coming year, because now the format and this, the distracting information and all that is going to be more readily available for our students to study from?
Well, first of all, I don't see an issue with sort of the jargon or even the, extra information. In fact, for me, that's actually a good thing because in the work environment, I don't get problems that are like, oh, these are exactly the facts that you need to know. I have to read through all the information provided, dissect it, and figure out what is pertinent, what's not, and apply the logic to it. So the fact that that's there doesn't bother me at all. What bothers me is they're not experiencing that beforehand. They're not experiencing that in a time-based situation beforehand.
But now we have the ability to do that, because what I'm saying is, all the students who are taking chemistry or physics next year have now just experienced that on the bio exams. And kids who are taking chemistry next year have just experienced that on the bio exam. And now that our faculty and our administrators understand what's going to be asked of the students, we can now, whether it's from other states, from our state, or self-created, create a better formatted example of what students are going to face when they take these exams next year. And I'm asking.
My understanding is bio and is much easier than chemistry and physics. Those are actually harder exams that are coming up. So that's one factor we have to take into consideration. The second thing is, because it is phenomena-based, meaning you're identifying a situation and you're answering a cluster of questions, I don't know how they're going to adjust that. I'm not even a teacher right now, so, but if I'm looking at this, I can't guarantee that the wording is this is going to be the same as bio. Physics and chemistry and bio are very different subjects.
But we're talking about the format. Like, it sounds like from what Mr. Cohen said, what Mrs. Lugutini said, that it's really the structure we were talking about getting faced with information you haven't seen before and being able to know what to extract from that problem, where it seems like our students who took the bio test, yes, they did it under fire, but they now have now become accustomed, at least a little bit, certainly more so than anybody else, to what that format is. And so if our teachers still can teach the content, and now we have a better understanding of what that format is, isn't it better to get that format out there, especially if what Dr. Cohen said, Mr. Cohen is saying about is better preparing our students for more advanced exams like AP Chemistry or AP Physics?
Not if they're not giving materials to practice.
But if our administration thinks they can now develop...
That's why I said, unless the school feels that they have the materials to empower the teachers and the students to succeed, my recommendation is don't put them in a situation where they're on an island trying to figure this out.
Understood. And then just the last point, I just wanted to get your view on this. I fully understand your point about what it is. I think the numbers Mr. Cohen gave us were that pass rates, and I understand, I agree with you. I think from the standpoint of judging Jericho students, pass rates are garbage. Like, it's like, it's not, for some students it's very important, but I think overall, when you look at the averages, whether it's 69, 78, we had extremely high pass rates, as we always have. And the issue is with mastery. And let me be clear, as you know, I'll let it know, so I had no kids who took these exams this year. There are board members who had students take those exams, and they are much closer to the situation than me. But my question is this, going back to your example on robotics and going back to your example about what your work experience is, you can put in all the work you want. You can do whatever it is you need. You're not always going to get an A+. You're not always going to get a 98. And I understand, like, I was bothered more by the mental health impact of these tests because these students, as you said, they weren't prepared, and I was more concerned that afterwards the school district was doing enough to assuage their concerns that they were stupid, that they were not competent, that they were going to fail. But at the end of the day, do you agree that there's some benefit to knowing that you're not always going to get 98 or 99 on a test? Because as you said, with your robotics club, your robotics team, where they set a goal, they didn't meet that goal. That's fine, but you can't. In essence, I'm hoping they make it to nationals next year or internationals next year. Trust me. But if they don't, I would hope it would take them less than 3 months to shake that off and say, you know what? We're not always going to win. It's like You don't win the Super Bowl, you don't have like a year to recover from it. You've got training camp in 3 months, you got the draft 2 weeks later. So I'm just sort of trying to understand, I understand what you're saying, that yeah, a kid who thought he was gonna get a 98 gets a 92, a kid who thought he was gonna get an 85 gets a 75. That's tough, I get it. I understand the mental anguish that's involved there. But I think part of the district's goals are to build resilient kids. And some of that is, you are not going to always achieve your goal. Nobody here is failing, let's be clear. Now, I understand kids getting below an 85 will see that as failing. I appreciate that premise. I do, I'm not discounting that. But at the end of the day, that's sort of what's gonna go on in life. Like, you could do all the work, your investment, it still goes down 20%, even though you thought it was gonna go up 50. So I'm trying to understand how we're supposed to play that in.
So, one, I think there's plenty of avenues for them to learn that lesson without having it be on their permanent transcript. My robotics team is a great example of that. They'll learn the lesson, they'll become resilient, and they don't have to live with it in terms of the opportunities that will be impacted. Now, you and I can go into a discussion whether the regents exam or any other exam or
You
the
can tell
grade.
people we have, but we have had that
Yeah.
conversation. So.
You know, whether that's gonna impact, but in my opinion, that's for the parents to decide how big of an impact that grade or that performance is gonna have on your own kid's future. And because the school district can't know everything that we're signing up for. And there are gonna be things where people will say, hey, I wanna see your transcript, I wanna see your performance on, I'll look it up. Because these are information that other schools can eventually access. And they're gonna look it up and it's gonna be on their permanent record. So I don't think it's right for us to make a decision on the format and not give the kids the power, the utilities and the tools to succeed and have it marked on their permanent record. I think if we were giving them the tools, that's fair. Then it becomes a individual preparation issue. In this case, I don't think it was an individual preparation issue. I think these kids prepared hard, but they have nothing that would have prepared for what they were gonna see. Even in the classroom, I get that we're teaching them that concept, but that's not the same as being in a time pressure, high stress situation. The closest you're gonna get is the sample exams and going through that over and over again. That's the closest these kids can get to that. And without that, and you're giving them old exams to practice, like, I don't even know how helpful those old exams were.
So Joe, actually, the exam was released. It's on, I said, regents.org, so you have the full exam as well as a key available.
Yeah, so
for
this
anybody.
coming year for biology, everybody will have at least one exam to practice.
Unless they change it again.
Well, they'll at least have that version to, look, it changes every year, but they'll have at least one version to at least simulate what they're gonna go through. The big issue you have now is there is no pass exam for chemistry, there is no pass exam for physics. And without the people writing these exams or coming up with this material, supplying some examples, how are we supposed to know what it's gonna look like?
I just want to speak an open secret for Jericho. I mean, obviously, a lot of people, they're smart and they do really well in the exam regardless of the format, because we got a lot of smart people here. But you got to understand that there's also a lot of kids that will struggle, they need help outside of school. And when they need help, they hire tutors. And when they do go to tutors, they don't have that information because it's new tests. So people spend all that money on tutoring, learning the wrong stuff. And that's why we're getting bad results. Well, I'm not talking about the spending.
They're not bad results. They're bad results relative to what we had.
For Jericho standard.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that, look, like I said, I don't think this district has made a formal decision yet, so I don't want people to walk out of here saying, we're done. But at the end of the day, I think what we're ignoring a little bit, that Mr. Cohen mentioned it, is that what have our students benefited from this process, and how does that, or does that offset the negative of them maybe having scored 5 or 10 points lower on the Regents exam than they thought? I can't answer that question objectively. I can't object because I don't know that. But to me, my understanding, and I understand what Ms. Williams is talking about, that there are programs that, you know, our sophomores, our juniors, our seniors are going to apply to, where they'll look and say, okay, you want to be in this advanced biomedical research program for the summer, you know, how'd you do on your bio regents exam? I fully get that. I also believe that part of that can be through a, you know, a conveyance of information to these places that, look, Jericho took the new regents that year. Our students are more sophisticated in their thinking. Now, did they score worse than someone who was in, you know, one of our neighboring school districts who got their 98, where all of our students would have gotten them? Yes, but I don't think that that makes it a cut and dry program, because again, it's like when a kid takes AP Chem versus regular Chem. You know, people understand that AP Chem is harder than regular Chem. So if two kids get an A, or one kid gets an A, one kid gets an A minus, you're probably going to give more benefit to the kid who got the A minus in AP Chem than the kid who got an A in regular Chem. And I'm saying that it's more complex, in my opinion. And again, there are members of the board who have lived this, and I, you know, in many ways defer to them because they're close to the situation. But I don't think it's just cut and dry. Our kids had lower scores relative to other districts who took a different test versus what did our kids learn, what did they benefit, and what's the long-term benefit of that learning? And I don't know the answer to that.
So there's one difference, right? So your AP classes are preparing you for the AP exam. They have material specific to the AP exam. So what you're suggesting is, hey, let's sacrifice a year of work, get potentially a performance you didn't expect, but it'll make you better for the next one, which is properly tooled, properly resourced. To me, the best approach is to properly resource things, give people the best chance to succeed, and then make that jump. Otherwise, what you're basically making them choose is sacrifice 1 year so you can do better next year. That to me is not a fair decision, because you're not giving them the resources needed to succeed. That's the way I look at it.
I was gonna let the next person speak, but I do just wanna say while she's coming up that, just living it, with my two kids, my kids benefited nothing at all taking the test. And they did not do as good as they wanted to, and they studied their butt off, and there was no benefit from the test, because they didn't learn. I mean, it's not like they learned something that's gonna help them for the next year. They walked out that test very upset. They then found out their score, they were very upset. At this point, they're in the summer, they're enjoying themselves. They're not looking back at the test. There was nothing that they benefited from the test. If anything, it was negative. It was a negative experience. It was mentally hard for them, and I think that it was also traumatizing, because now they're gonna go into next year and they're gonna, oh, is this gonna happen again?
And I just want to add, first I have to introduce myself, right? My name is Lauren Malone Silverberg, and thank you all. We really appreciate all of you, the board, and welcome to the new superintendent. And everything again I'm about to say is I hold our administrators, our teachers, all of you in the highest regard. And what I just want to add to what, because Sylvia touched on a lot of what I was going to ask, Jen touched on a lot, and you touched on a lot. I have a student in 8th grade who took the art science test. For many of these 8th graders, this was the first region that they've ever taken. And when you get a unanimous, when you have kids walking out of a region, if you know our kids never all think the same thing, or say the same things, or agree on the same thing. When you have 100% of the students walking out, whether it was the kid who always got 100, or the kid who was in accelerated and doing well, but not as well, all saying the same thing. It wasn't just about the format, Sam. It was about the content and the curriculum. And I've heard from some of our teachers, I've heard from the students that a lot of it, I can only speak to the earth science region, that a lot of what was on that test wasn't based on the curriculum that was given for teachers. So I think that's not on our teachers, it's not on our students. They were well prepared as well as they could. Our teachers prepared them as well as they could. Our students are hardworking. We all know about our students. You touched upon them. It wasn't about the format. It was partly about the format, but it was about the content. That the content wasn't based on the curriculum. And again, I don't want to repeat myself, that's not on the teachers, it's not on the administrators, that's on the state. So what are we doing to work with the state for future regions, whether it's earth science next year, biology, or if you decide to move to chemistry and physics? How are we working with them when we're not getting any answers from them? Like, how do you, I don't know if you have the answer to that question, but how do you move forward when, if you look at the media reports too, their spokesperson, they're taking no responsibility for this. They're saying that the curriculum matched the regions, at least that's what I saw in statements, but clearly it didn't. So how do we move forward?
I'll answer it two ways.
Okay.
Again, all we can do is continue to advocate for our students and our
Right.
teachers and the learning experience. And, you know, we've done that, and we will continue to do that. I can't sit here and tell you that I can make any promises on behalf of the state. I wish I could, but I can certainly make promises in terms of how we go about making decisions and how we advocate for our kids. Again, I
And you
use.
do that, I know you're doing that.
And we will
I just don't know
continue,
what the right-
well, I mean, there are formats for which our administrators, you know, and specifically in this case, our Curriculum Associate of Science, has representation in local groups and state-led groups, as well as the ability to directly communicate with state ed. So those are happening. To what degree they're going to hear that information, and to what degree that's going to amount to change, I wish I could tell you I knew the answer to that. You know, we're experiencing some frustration as well. As far as the conversation about content, it's nuanced, you know, and again, I'm not the expert in the room on this, but I have sat with Ms. Libertine. When you start talking about content versus the way these questions were formatted, so, you know, I've heard the same things that many of the adults in the room and the parents hearing from the kids coming out. There was a question on congestion pricing.
Yes.
Well, clearly, we know that congestion pricing as a topic isn't part of the curriculum, but sustainability is one of the key components of the curriculum in the content area. So when we talk about providing the students with nuanced situations in which they have to extrapolate information and problem solve, there is alignment. And again, I'm not defending the question, I'm not saying that it's appropriate, but again, I think it goes deeper than merely calling it a content question or not content. Again, we're agreeing that there was a flaw in that exam,
Right.
but I just bring that up as how deep the nuance and the analysis
But
goes.
also, I know a lot of folks in curriculum was on the new, what is it called?
Science.
Classification? Is it a new, something classification, it's like a new classification that they studied? And they basically had one or two questions on the whole test, and that was a lot of what they learned this year. Tectonic plates, I mean, you could ask the students, and you could ask the teachers, I mean, they know too, so.
There's plenty, I'm
Right,
in
okay.
agreement with a lot of what you're saying. So, and again, I'm not trying to debate back and forth,
Right.
but again,
I
there's
just
so
want to know
many
how we move
layers of
forward
this.
from this, because this was,
You know, I think we're hearing it tonight. Part of it is how we learn and prepare our students and how we try to gain understanding about the best content and the best materials and the best scenarios that we can put our students in to prepare them. And then there's also an advocacy piece, and obviously there's a part of that that we need to let the state know, that we don't think that the test was appropriately created, and that it could have been done in a much better format.
thank you.
Good, everyone.
Oh, you don't? Yeah, I'm sorry, okay, it's okay, we don't talk about
Ms.
it.
Moore?
No.
Ms. Nolan, before you go, Mrs. Liddy, Ms. Nolan, everything you're saying is true, and I think when you said, well, what are we doing? I think it's really gonna be up to our administrators.
And I'm asking,
Oh, no, I know you
a
are.
lot.
No, I think it is gonna be up to our administrators over the next, I don't know if it's 3 to 6 weeks before we really have to make a decision to get comfortable with what we can do to get our students in a better position and to convince this board that they can put our students in a better position so that this doesn't occur. Because, like you said, as Mrs. Varner said, we need to have this answer as soon as possible. And I'm sure that there are other districts who are struggling with the same question. I'm sure, or I know there are other districts that have already decided, I believe, to go back to the old.
It's even not just about chemistry and physics, it's about how do we prepare them for biology next year or earth science and.
100%.
A lot of that comes from the state, it's not our teachers.
And that's what we need to figure out. The flip side, the part of that though is everybody's gonna be taking that biology exam next year. Everybody's gonna be taking that earth science exam next year. It's not just Jericho.
Right, right.
So,
But
so
at least
100%.
They do have like one or two regions, I guess they have the August region and the January
Yeah.
region that they can use now
They-
as a basis.
They will have 2 more tests, the
But-
same way that
right.
we can take, as I was mentioning to Mr. Lynn, we can take that format. I believe our teachers are capable of taking
Right, I
that
just feel
approach.
bad for the kids and I feel.
We all feel bad for the
And I
kids.
feel bad for the teachers, because our teachers are the best in the New York State, they're probably the best in the country. And they really did everything they possibly could do, and everyone was upset about it.
Absolutely.
And that's.
And everybody up here understands that, and as you said, have been doing a lot of work and a lot of conversations to try to get as many answers as possible. And this is why you've heard us talk about this for the last 2 years in many areas. We're not big fans, I'm gonna speak for we. I am not a big fan of the New York State Education Department because of things like this, where if you make a mistake, own up to it, talk about it, explain what happened, and tell you how you're gonna fix it.
Right, exactly, we just want to fix, right?
Yes.
Okay, everybody, thank you, thanks, okay, I'm done, sorry about that.
Hi, Tina Levy, and although I don't have children that have done this, I just want to explain something to you. Having had a parent, kids 10 years apart, some people on the board were part of this. My children were part of Common Core. You want to talk about a disaster? And kids crying, parents hysterical, meetings for parent-teacher conferences to show parents how to help their children with math in particular, okay? And actually, I will say it, I gave my child's homework to Mr. Grishman himself, and I said, you do this, because we can't even do it and figure it out. The term back then was, we are teaching our children while we're building an airplane in air. We had nothing. And as parents, our kids were devastated because they couldn't even pass an in-class test. I also went through the rounds, and some parents up here, where the first time we gave regents online, and I remember a couple of classrooms, the test crashing in the middle of a regents test. You want to talk about kids crying. Nobody wants that for their child. I don't, they don't, our teachers, and none of you do. But I can tell you this one thing. We are the best in Jericho. We push our kids. Those experiences have taught me my children did not get the grades that they thought they should have gotten, or their teachers should have thought they'd gotten, or how many hours they prepared for. But they grew resilient. They got grit. They understood that not everything was going to be spoon-fed. And I can guarantee you that when I was sitting here with young kids in the school district, as a parent, I know we had groups, especially for Common Core, where we wrote letters to the New York State Department of Education. We went to Common Core meetings. This Regents is horrible, it's devastating. But again, to what was said here tonight, our children, I understand they weren't the best, but they were better than anybody else because of our teachers giving them the forethought to do critical thinking out of the box, which I hate to sound cruel right now, but that's real life. That's taking the bar, that's being a doctor, that's doing business. There are things that are thrown at you. It's not what the kids wanted, and if I'm not mistaken, this final exam doesn't, it's on their transcript, but it doesn't go into their GPA, is that correct? Correct, it's no, right, okay, and the same thing that happened during COVID. So I think part of this lesson is, if I remember correctly, and the board will correct me, when you were given the sample of this test, it looked very different, the sample versus what the kids were actually given. Is that a
I don't
correct
think there was
statement?
I don't think there was a sample.
There were 2 questions, but whatever you were given, right, it was very vastly different from the test that was actually received.
That's
So
correct.
your decision was based upon the exact information that New York State gave them, that the school thought they were doing the best, because we are Jericho and we want our children to do their best, okay? So I think everybody needs to take a deep breath. I don't think, honestly, this is going to be resolved in a matter of weeks, because from what I'm hearing correct here, is that that test is going to be mandatory, like that is the test going forward in those 2. So our teachers are a little bit wiser, they know better. They already did well in the last test, whether you want to do more than a grade. I mean, we used to have a saying when I was in PTA, your child is more than a grade on a piece of paper. so you need to believe in them more than that on a particular test. But it is devastating. But I also think what everybody's missing is your kids still did better than the average, not as well as they would like to, but they're learning resilience. And I know how you feel, Mr. Lynn, and other parents, even like me, I never want to see my kid cry. None of us. But they need to learn to, as Mrs. Bartman has said, your kids moved on. They were devastated, they didn't learn anything, but they moved on, they're having a good summer. And they're gonna be better next year because our teachers are gonna be better informed. And I really trust this board and the district that anything that can be done, we are not alone in this. New York State's gonna hear, and if you want, do what I did back in the days of Common Core and other things that went on. I wrote letters directly, and we had PTA write letters to New York State to let them know how you feel as parents. It's very difficult. I think you're doing great, we're not perfect, but our kids do need a little resilience, and we need to keep this in perspective. This is not affecting their GPA or into any college. They're gonna see it, but they're gonna know what it is, especially coming out of New York.
Just want to address two things. We talked about the fact that these are nuanced applications. That's actually exactly why you need practice. When you're talking about nuanced applications, you need to practice that to be able to identify these situations. But this is not the same as regurgitating and saying, hey, I memorized this. You have to sit there and identify, and you don't have practice doing that. That's a very hard thing to do. Two, I don't accept the fact that just because it was bad for Common Core, that we should accept that it should also be bad now when we have a choice that we can make. You know, it's one thing if you don't have a choice. You have a choice right now. So you need to make the best choice that empowers the kids that are here now and are going to be affected by it now, not the kids that are going to be affected by 2 years from now, 3 years from now, but the ones that are affected by it now. Because they only get high school once. They don't get to repeat this.
If there are no other comments from people in the audience, Mr. Manuel, do we have any emails asking to be read?
Yes, two.
Thank you.
First one is from Sam Marini, also about the regents. Can we simplify this? Has anyone compared the test to the actual curriculum to determine the gaps? And are those gaps being closed this coming year, or is the same curriculum being taught?
So from my understanding, the curriculum is matching, the standards that are required of the next generation science standards. The gap that occurred, and I appreciate everybody's comments about the assessment, but if you look at historically throughout the country, anytime there is a new assessment, there's always a drop because no one is prepared for it. There were sample questions with the resources, what I'm being told that the teachers were using. It was not the resources that were going to, or they were not the same assessments, type of questions that were presented on the exam itself. But this has happened, as you mentioned, Common Core. It has happened nationally every time, whether it was the Park exam or any other exam throughout the states. That's what's happening. And the best course of action is actually not necessarily the Board of Education, but the government. They are the education departments from each state are the ones who dictate what those assessments can be. And that goes back all the way to 2001 when we started this whole concept of testing all the time, all of our kids. So that's one of the problems that we see. So we can't even guarantee, I don't think anyone on this board or anyone in the state of New York can actually guarantee what that assessment will look like a year from now. We can't. We can get some assessments that are practice assessments, but we don't know. And I don't think any publisher knows until we actually see it. And that's a problem for scores for children, and we recognize that. We don't want children to suffer. But I can tell you just in listening and speaking to a lot of the teachers and the curriculum associates, they are doing a lot of work to make sure that there are no gaps between the curriculum and the standards. But the assessment is something that we don't have any input on.
Okay, next question, also from Sam Marini, bus question clarification.
It's going to cost $15K to retrofit 14 plus or minus buses for Jericho that are first student buses. Jericho is paying for that even though we're contracted with first student for the buses. Or are these buses owned by Jericho and operated by first student? So a couple of clarifications there. It's not 14 buses, it would be 6. And the cost is approximately $15,500 each bus to retrofit it. It is not a Jericho-owned bus, it is a first student-owned bus. And if, again, no decision has been made on the 6 buses at this point, it was just a discussion that we had with first student, and looking at the final 6 buses, how would we handle those? So no decision has been made to date, but obviously if the board were to entertain this, we would make sure in the agreement that those buses can only be used in the Jericho School District if we did move forward with putting in any expenditure to retrofit those 6 buses.
And just one clarification, just right. Absent Jericho paying for those buses, when would First Student commit to providing us air-conditioned buses that we were not, as a district, retrofitting?
The, again, out of the 18, we're
getting the 10 and the 2, but those
we're
other
getting
6.
the 10 and the 2, and the 6 would be over 2 to 3 years after that.
Okay, so
I would think, but I would have to have a follow-up discussion.
Okay, so that's not a committed, that's.
Yeah, no, I would want to get a little more
It
detail.
could be 5 years, potentially.
It could be, but I would like to get a little more information on it.
And last question, what's in our plans, do you know offhand, for the next 2 years in terms of how many more buses the district is going to purchase, if any?
At this point, again, we plateaued as far as the number of buses in our fleet. We've been adding 2 or 3 every year for the last decade. So we're at the point where while we're purchasing 2 or 3 additional buses, they will be replacing obsolete buses.
So provided enrollment stays the same, we are going to need those 6 buses for the foreseeable future.
Correct.
Okay. Is that all of the emails?
That's all I have.
Perfect. So with that, we shall move on to new business. Adoption of district-wide safety and emergency management plan. Be it resolved that the Board of Education adopts a district-wide safety and emergency management plan for the 25-26 school year as shown in the attached. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mrs. Varnoff. Second, Mrs. Citron, thank you. Any discussion? I will take it. And can someone please explain the staff training that goes on with this? Does every staff member in the building understand this, know what it is, has been briefed on it, how often, when, and as such?
We have Alteris, who I know has presented to the board. They come in and they work with each of the safety committees. So they work with district safety committee as well as each of the building safety committees. They do a bit of a deeper dive into trainings. The main focus on trainings with the staff will revolve around any changes in the policy each year, as well as the different types of drills. That becomes the crux of where safety presents itself most to all members of the staff.
So they know, they've been briefed on it, and
They'd be able to recite it, and they know what to do in case of any emergency, any student issue. Perfect. Any other comments? All in favor of adoption? Thank you. 5-0. Appreciate that. Next, execution of stipulation ST 2025-02. Recommended motion. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves special education stipulation ST 2026-01 for the 25-26 school year, and to direct the superintendent to sign such stipulation on behalf of the board. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Mrs. Vartanoff. Second, yes, all right.
One point of information on that. Executive
Title.
stipulation. Yes, it's a typo.
Yeah, we're going to get to that after. When we get to the discussion, I'm just going to handle that, but yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Kravitz. Already provided tremendous value.
Twice, I know, I'm trying my best here to bring that up.
We'll give you a layup.
I was feeling good after the 10 days, but now.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Dr. Balachander. All in favor? 5-0. Thank you very much. Moving on, acceptance of first reading, policy 7316, student use of internet-enabled devices. Do I have a motion? Thank you. Seconded. Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Discussion. And I'll just start. This is a, oh, Mr. What did I say? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Jim and Mr. Lynn. They can't be here together. Just like me and Mr. Bahraini shouldn't be here together either. So it's just a horrible coincidence. I apologize, Mr. Jim. This is a redraft of the policy that we adopted 3 months ago in response to New York State law, the section of the Education Law 2803, which bans electronic devices or places severe limitations on their use in school. So we have to adopt the policy that we adopted 3 months ago to reflect that rule. Comments?
I have a few questions. So, paragraphs with the use of personal internet-enabled Category 1 devices, where it specifies that unless such use is included in the student's IEP, 504, I think that we should be also including that if it's medically authorized, just with appropriate documentation. It says that elsewhere in the policy, that it's not necessarily just IEP 504. Correctly, if you have medical documentation supporting that you need to have a device, it should be permitted.
Yeah, but I think later on, you go right to the next paragraph later, it says, for all students, the building administration has the discretion to allow students to use personal internet-enabled Category 1 devices during the school day. It includes number 2,
Number one.
number 2, where necessary for the management of students.
All right.
Okay, so you think that that's,
Yeah,
so that's fine. And then,
On the draft I printed, they were fine. Oh, no, you guys are looking at the mark one. If you looked at the one that they actually put into the board package that's online, all the numbers got screwed up. They got screwed, the numbers,
There was only one marking in like green, the rest of it wasn't marked.
I don't know why that
it's
happened.
just that
in the
one
email.
green thing we needed to.
You had to hit show changes, I think. When it went through, you had to say show changes. No, it wasn't.
It was more than just the field trip that we needed to vote on, that was different?
No, that was the only thing that I thought I don't know why it was,
Yeah.
that was the only thing that was inconsistent with New York State law.
But it wasn't the same as the policy.
Not at all, it was totally different than Steve's policy.
Right, so it's supposed to show changes, but the only thing that showed up was just reading.
And no, I think what happened was when I sent it through, you have to hit show change, like it was a Word document, so for whatever reason, I think you saw the change. Yeah, you had to just hit show changes, so it was a Word document, you had to show changes. I apologize, I will get better at this. But no, that was it. So like if we don't want, if people want to review this some more and we want to sort of punt on it, we are supposed to approve something by August 1st, but I understand why people wouldn't. And by the way, Dr. Beltran, that language about 501, that's directly from New York State law. That's why Mr. Good, that was part of Mr. Good says, it was copied word for word.
Got it. And I just wanted to know why we had removed in the numbered items about where the limited instances in which a device is permitted, a personal device is permitted, why we removed if authorized by a teacher, principal, or school district? Why did you remove that?
Category 1, Category 2, which school? Middle school or high school?
Both under elementary,
It's removed.
And middle
Under
school.
elementary.
And it's
Under high
also-
school, it's not.
right, but also in the paragraph before it, it just says building administration has the discretion to allow students, blah, 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 blah.
Because I think under what we talked about previously in our old policy, in elementary schools, you were not allowed to use an outside device for any way, shape, or form, and the teachers weren't having that discretion, if I remember properly. That's what I did here. That was under our old policy, the same thing that was going on in middle school. The only exception we made were for high schoolers were going to be allowed to use their own personal Chromebooks or computers. And so that's what I thought I was trying to mirror here. If I did that incorrectly, please correct it.
That's correct, but this is, I think even in the paragraph preceding, you took out authorized by a teacher, principal, or school district.
Absolutely, because I don't think we want, I think New York State law is, teachers can't just say, oh, take your phone out and use it, because you just become a
But
slippery
that's
slope.
what's in New York, that's what's on
No,
the,
so in New York State law, you're allowed, so what you, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Bergman, but at the same time, yes, it works. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Bergman, but at the same time, the law does give that caveat for teachers and administrators. But as a board, you can limit that. I would probably, if you were going to limit it, to prevent the issue that you're portraying, that any teacher could take it on their own whimsical manner, you know what, I want cell phones out today. Maybe leave it up to building administration to give that ability if approved. For category 1.
Yeah,
I thought as a board, we were pretty clear a few months ago that there was no reason for elementary students to have their phones. And I thought that was the objective, that at least that was one of the things we agreed on a few months ago.
It's in the same paragraph as middle school students, though.
Middle school students were only going to be allowed to use their phones in the hallways. They weren't going to be allowed to use them in class. Even I think with teacher, I don't think teachers in the middle school were, maybe they were, I apologize, I'm just not remembering. But again, here's the problem with middle schoolers. We need to provide them a place to store their phones. Under our current policy, middle schoolers are not allowed to carry backpacks. So there really is no place for a middle schooler to store his or her phone. It has to be in their locker. So I'm not quite sure, like, it's not like a teacher can just randomly say, okay, everybody pull out your phones, because I don't want to say ideal world, they shouldn't have their phones because they don't have a backpack like a high schooler does to put their phone away. So if they're just wearing a pair of shorts, they've got no place to put their phone. So from a practical standpoint, I was like, because that's what's in here, like, middle schools have to put it in their locker because I don't know where else they're gonna put it. But again, this was, and we can change, like I said, we can change it however we want to change it, as long as Mr. Gusset says it's consistent with New York State law.
Can I just clarify? No, just to clarify, yeah, that's not a board decision. If you want to leave it that way, that is a way that you can. You don't have to. So technically, you don't have to allow anything other than 504 IEP health plan, so on and so forth. With regards to discretion, you have discretion. With regards to the point of the green, you know, it's the definition of school grounds. I've had this in other places, so I'm glad you put it in green, because it really is board discretion. What is school ground? So does the field trip count as a school ground? That's up to you. It's during the school day. Obviously, it is an overnight trip. You're not expecting people to not have their cell phones for an entire weekend. But if they're going to, say, Old Bethpage, and it's during the school day, it's only during the school day, do you want that to count? That's up to you.
And the only reason I was thinking is that the one thing people know their kids or anything's going on, they take pictures with their phones. They may post it later on, and then if they're going to Old Bethpage, I'd love for them to take a picture of whatever's in Old Bethpage, I don't know. But if they went to Sagamore, wherever Teddy Roosevelt's from, on that trip, you know, they could take some pictures there. That's the only reason why I didn't like it on field trips, and I do feel for the kids who will be on air-conditioned buses for their field trips, that they're sitting there potentially for half an hour, 2 hours, that if they don't want to talk to some annoying kid next to them, that they can just get on their phone and play a game.
So again, that's board discretion. If you want to remove that. No, right now it's written that it's not. If you want it out, take it out. You can still first read.
I think we should remove the green one, because personally, in my opinion, I'm not saying like it happened before or whatever, but just for prevention purpose, the phone act as a phone or watches, they can act as a tracking system in case the kids get lost during the field trip or whatever, you can track them, you can find them right away. So I think we should leave it.
I'm good with that.
Wait, leave it in
Okay.
or take it
Like
out?
leave it original, but take out the green.
Yeah, okay, that's what I'm saying, so we
Yeah.
remove field trips.
Just piggybacking on you talking about losing and tracking and all this stuff, I wanted to change, sorry, I lost my place now, I'm going back and forth, but yeah, there's a place where it says shut off the phone, versus it used to be, the original silent, put on silent. I'm recommending we put it back to silent and not force them to shut it off, because then you lose the tracking mechanism. If they misplaced it, at least you could do a Find My iPhone and it shows where it is.
My understanding, and I defer to Mr. Bahraini probably who's listening, my understanding is Find My iPhone does work when the phone is shut off for about 7 days afterwards. So that's first of all. Second of all,
Does your Apple Watch, if you turn your phone on silent, I think you still get?
I don't wear any watch, so I
No,
don't
but I
know.
think you still get, I think I still get notifications.
No,
I think it shows the last place the phone was.
right, but if the kid misplaces it.
If your phone is
it's
on
still leave it.
silent, you still get notifications on your Apple Watch.
Stole your phone and shut it off.
But then once they turn it off, the phone is no good to them if they shut it off. So
If someone steals it, they shut it off, that's great until they turn it on.
Theft, I was just,
No, I know, but I was like, no, you wrote that, and I looked it up, because I certainly didn't know, because I mean, maybe I have to find my iPhone on there,
Do we
but.
just have the kids have air tags? Because my kids, I have air tags on there, but like, I know this sounds stupid, but I'm just saying, like, the air tags are much more efficient than their cell phones if they lose it or
Not
something
everyone's
else.
carrying it
On
in
a
their
field, no, I'm saying on a field trip, they put it in their pocket or their backpack.
I think she's talking, oh, I see what you're saying, you're talking about using phones on field trips. No, Mrs. Martinoff's talking about whether or not in school, when you come to school and you have to store your phone, like high schoolers are allowed to put it in their backpacks. She's saying, should you shut it off or should you put it on vibrate? My first issue is one, your issue was about finding the phone. Finding my iPhone does work when the phone is off for up to 7 days. Two, my concern is that, as Mrs. Citron was saying, as Mrs. Levy was saying, the phone's still gonna buzz, vibrate, or something like that, which will then make the kid jittery as he's sitting there and he's hearing his phone vibrate in his bag. And third, one of the things that New York State doesn't want explicitly is kids using their phones anywhere. We will still have children who will try to check their phones as they're walking between classes. If their phone is on, they will quickly pull it out and they will walk carrying it, thereby breaking New York State law. Whereas if the phone is off, it will take them at least a minute or two to power, I don't know how long an iPhone takes to power up. And it will then, hinder their ability to do that. Again, at this point, we're under New York State law, so that was what was the thought process that went into why they should be off versus silenced. But again, as Mr. Goodstead says, that's board opinion.
I mean, I do agree with you having it on between classes. It'll definitely tempt them to just reach in and check it if they have it in their backpacks. And I guess who's going to be policing that? And that's going to be a nightmare to police and deal with the disciplinary action. And I see the disciplinary is in here that the teachers, administrators can take it away. So I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, I just know from my own Apple Watch that when my phone's silenced, I still get the notifications.
Yes, on Apple Watch, yes, you're right.
So,
Even if it's
so
on,
I feel like if you silence it, it defeats the purpose of the whole.
yeah. So you think shut it off? So I find my iPhone. I didn't look into that fact where it's 7 days, so I don't. That's the only. What?
Do any of our kids not have iPhones?
Let me Google it.
It's a joke, it's a joke, it's a joke.
So while you're looking at that, I don't know why I'm not following this, but Dan, if you could explain to me why you have the separate 3 paragraphs that repeats number 1 through 6. They look. What am I missing?
The first one is for all students and it deals with category 1.
Right, but the 1 through 6 is the same for all of them. So what's
No. Category 1 only has 1 through 5. Category the first one for all students only has 1 through 5.
So
it has, where necessary for management of students' health in the event of an emergency, translation services case by case when required by law. That should be the 5 that are there.
I see. I know. I see.
I'm trying to revise you.
No, what's
There. So if you look at it from the clean copy,
The first section has to do with just category 1, iPhones, watches, smart glasses, and tablets.
So, but the second paragraph is exactly the same too.
No, but the second one is, the second one is the same
So you could
because
so you could make it simpler and say category 1.
category 1 for all students and category 2 for high school, for elementary school and middle school, yes.
So the only difference is category 2 for high school.
Correct.
You could streamline it and make.
You absolutely could. I just didn't know. I again am just very regimented in thinking that I'm like, okay, here's all students, here's elementary and middle school students, here's this, makes it easier. I thought for parents, but again, the drafting, I leave to whoever wants to change it, as long as, that's just the objective of it. And the 2 things we'll say is for people who haven't read education law, probably by the 2nd week in August, you want to be at your cell phone provider buying your child a non-internet enabled phone. So they do exist and they're allowed under the law. So this only deals with internet accessible devices. And there are, prehistoric phones that only have, and I'm not saying it to tell people to do it, but I know I'm going to get this phone call and email and text, I'm sure we all will, from 25 parents each. That there's nothing in this rule that deals with the old style phone that just takes phone calls and texts, where even the text, you have to hit a number 3 times to get the letter you want. So again, I have not dealt with that here. Clearly that is going to occur. I don't know what the board wants to do about that, but this was simply to bring us into alignment with New York State law. And we don't have to answer that question today.
I had 2 other comments on the policies. For where we start with high school students and category 2 devices, our previous policy said we were permitting students who were taking high school level coursework to also be able to use these category 2 devices. So should we amend this statement to say?
I thought what we decided was for those kids who were taking it, I thought the school was providing them advanced devices was our last conversation. For some reason, that was in my head, because I remember when we had that conversation, I was shocked by the fact, Mr. Goodstad, who, you know, is paid not to agree with me, is shaking his head yes. So it's.
I thought we were allowing children to use it.
I thought that, it was my recollection that you guys were, the district was buying Chromebooks.
No. Chromebooks, yes, but for
At the middle
it's
school.
8th graders or 7th graders don't
Those taking
accelerate
advanced
it.
courses.
That was the conversation we had. So as I said, it's like, if Mr. Goodstad agreed, then, you know, something's got to be there. We could both be wrong, don't get us wrong, but that was it. But no, again, Dr. Balachandra, if I'm wrong about that, then absolutely we're going to need to change it.
About them allowing them their own personal
Yeah,
computer.
high school,
Yeah, and
they're
anyone,
allowed, and then the accelerated, double accelerated and single accelerated in eighth grade.
Then it's just making the policy, then it's just killing the policy. That's why, there was definitely a meeting where we talked about where we were, when they went into that advanced math class, we were providing them whatever computer power they needed to take that class at the middle school. Now again,
They're gonna be time safe and how do you control that?
you can't, which is
Yeah, that's
why the school said they were only
Trust me, I
going
want
to
my
use,
kids to have a.
to have-
a nice
to have
fancy
those things.
Just for the middle
laptop.
school.
yeah, just for the middle school.
High school kids, 9 through 12, they can bring their own.
Absolutely, they can do whatever they want, but if you're an 8th grader taking advanced math, you're in geometry, you know what, the school will provide you with whatever necessary hardware you need to take that course. So it's like whether we're putting carts in there with the 20, whatever device you want to use, that was my understanding of what we said we were doing last year.
I think we
Oh,
can change that.
Okay, so now I got 3 people who paid not to,
Tiebreaker here. All right, and then the last thing was just in line with what New York State has said for where it comes to the code of conduct. Do we need to be including something about how we will not be suspending as a means?
Yeah, that was my comment too, because in the sample policies you
Because that's-
gave, it said, if they're not otherwise, there's not, no other
So,
action.
yeah, if you want to add that line, because yes, Ms. Citron and Dr. Balachandra are right, but.
It says the district may not impose suspension from school if the sole ground for the suspension is that the student access the internet and the mobile device as prohibited by this policy.
Yeah, I mean, that should be added.
Yeah, no, I agree, yeah, no,
I have all the changes, don't worry. I got it.
like I said, that is what we do too.
Yes, but this policy I thought is overriding whatever we agreed to. That's what, I thought this policy is just overriding everything we did before.
No, it's making it comply with law. So
Yes,
so
but-
if what we agreed to before
Yes.
fits into the current law, the new law, then they could both be there.
Okay, so it's not overriding, so is this a separate policy?
no, it's
No.
overriding.
No, it's
overriding.
This will be the policy.
So this policy, like the paper of this policy is replacing that policy, but the concept,
The content.
the content is
Got it.
still allowed to be there if it doesn't violate the law. So going back to my previous comment, I think it would seem much more clear if you said for all students, I mean, the building administration has discretion to allow students category 1 and category 2, and then just separate, because that's all the same for everyone, but the only difference is high school for category 2. Which I think, do you understand what I'm saying in terms of, I could,
No, I understand what you're saying.
I think it's streamlining, I think it'll make it clear.
Just to clarify, when you say streamline, you want to say, then, you want to say for category 1 and for elementary school and middle school, category 2, 1 through 5?
Yeah, and then it's just one separate paragraph for category.
For high school category.
High school category 3, in addition, you could just have that number 1.
I obviously defer personally as I read it.
You
I
think it's
saw,
clear?
I thought it was clear
I
just
found it
because
very
you
hard
have
to follow
kids.
this.
I thought it was clear because, and we could probably do point headers instead to make it more clear. So you do point header 1, category 1 devices. You have the 1 paragraph, and then point header 2, category 2 devices, and then you have elementary, middle, and then high school. I think.
Even though we're gonna sort of violate law, we're gonna do the first read, we'll do the second read in August, and at that point, you'll have a clean copy, and if it's not clear on the clean copy, then we'll change it.
But if you could make it
I'll make it.
clearer.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't care how you
Does
do
that-
it,
does
this,
that-
this,
does that sound
this is
better
very
now?
hard to follow, yes.
Because I understand,
yes,
it's
this
just,
is
point
hard
headers
to
always make everything
Yes.
better.
They do.
Still need to move.
Oh, I know. So without any other comments, and if anyone wants to talk, please, I'll break protocol, but I don't think anyone's getting excited about this. Do I have a vote, do I have anyone in favor of adopting for a first read the new approved policy 7316?
With the changes we.
With the changes we discussed. Thank you, Mrs. Citron. First, we already did that. 5-0, thank you very much. I apologize to the people in the audience. I've had a request from a board member if we could have if we could go into executive session for about not more than 5 minutes. Okay, Mrs. Johnson, 5 to 10 minutes. We will be coming back in 5 to 10 minutes to finish the agenda where we will be approving and discussing the schedules. But there is an item that's come up during this meeting that the board would like to discuss for 5 to 10 minutes. So do I have a motion to go into executive? Anyone second we move into executive? I'll second it then. All in favor of going to executive session to discuss this information? 5-0, thank you. We will be back it is now 9:10. We hope to be back by 9:20.
Sorry.
Michelle.
Maybe they receive some emails. Oh yeah, discussion, right? That's what we're here for. That's all the time. Discussion. Oh, that's why you post the thing on Facebook, the main kind of
it's a clock and it feels like I have nice warm.
While they're on intermission, I asked, but now it is back online.
Bring it to Ed. Bring it to Ed.
Be it resolved, the Board of Education adjourns
Okay, that's 4 letters. How is that?
Yeah, sure.
Are we back on? Thank you.
The board's apology for taking longer than the 10 minutes. We have a walk-on resolution that we're going to consider now before we move to the schedules. I'll read the resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Jericho Union Free School District hereby authorizes Ingram and Smith LLP to commence litigation against a former employee of the district. Be it further resolved that the BOE of the Jericho Union Free School District hereby authorizes Robert Kravitz, Superintendent of Schools of the Jericho Union Free School District, to sign any document necessary to effectuate the above referenced litigation. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Discussion.
No, I mean, yeah.
Okay, then we'll move to a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Vote is 3-2. That then brings us to the end of our new business section of our meeting. Unless anyone objects, do I have a motion to approve schedules A15333 through U380? That is all the schedules in tonight's package.
Motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Vargoff. Do I have a second? Second, Mrs. Citron. Thank you. Discussion. Mr. Manuel, you knew we were going to have a little bit of a conversation just about the cafeteria numbers and performance year over year. Just a quick recap of why the numbers look so bad even though they're really not. Sure.
Okay, same question. So, as you know, last year, we had a pretty sizable surplus in the school income after the first year with Aramark coming on board. And we had decided at that time to use a portion of that to redo all of the lines at the middle school and the high school, which cost upwards a little over $250,000, which the board approved. The contractor to move forward with it. If you look at the report under equipment, I believe this year it's about $259,000. Last year was about $7,000 that we spent in equipment, and that was for that project. If you take that one-time expense out of the equation, it's very comparable to last year's results. Slightly lower, but not overly material by any means. Our plan is, over the next 1 to 2 years, to do some improvements at a couple of the elementary schools that we feel need some improvement. I'm confident with the new regulation from the state providing meals to all students, that our reimbursement rate will be greater than what it is currently, and we will probably have more participation. My only concern and challenge is, especially at the middle school where the lines are difficult to get through, to have more students now because the meals are free. I think the lines that we did will probably help that situation, but that's my concern for next year, but I think we'll overcome it. We also joined the breakfast program at all the buildings at this point, so we will offer breakfast as well. And each of the elementary schools, middle school and high school. I don't anticipate large participation for that, only because of the timing of when the kids come in, especially in the middle school and the elementary schools. But we will offer some type of grab and goes for the breakfast portion. And that's why you see a difference between this year's results and last year's.
Anybody have any follow-up questions for Mr. Manuel on that? One quick thing on the treasurer's report. I know there was a revised treasurer's report. I tried to the best of my ability on the 5 pages to figure out what the difference was between the original and the revised, and I failed.
Yeah, it was like literally like a $300 discrepancy in one of the numbers that was transposed. It was
Nothing. It was
immaterial.
$300 immaterial. Perfect. Do we need to adjust HRT 15292 instructional resignations, or is that an activity for the August meeting? Thank you. Those are all my questions. If anyone else has any other points for discussion? If no one has any other discussion points, do I have a vote? All in favor? 5-0. Thank you very much. As all the business on the agenda for tonight's meeting is complete, do I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Citron, thank you. Second, Mr. Jin. Thank you. All in favor of adjourning? 5-0. Have a nice evening. See you August 4th, 7:30. Here.